Hello and welcome to Left Ahead, an alternative media source offering a comprehensive look at progressive policy while trimming through that stingy corporate fat. I'm your host, Lincoln, and it's my commitment to stay independent, unbought, and ad-free on this platform. All my fellow bread tubers are out here getting demonetized left and right, so I just thought I wouldn't deal that right from the start. So if you'd like to support me, please consider making a donation directly on Patreon. That would really help keep this show rolling. So without further ado, let's get into the video. Today I'll be covering the shortcomings of the US healthcare system and how Medicare for All, which is already pulling at over 70%, aims to fix these flaws. Now I know
A 17-minute
video on healthcare and bills and healthcare bills isn't the most appealing in this endless online abyss of memes and cats and meme cats, but this issue is really due for a close examination, so that's what I'm here to offer. I promise I'll do my best to make it enjoyable, although I can't guarantee that you'll be smiling the whole time. We're talking about some pretty dark shit today. Yeah, it's kind of sad. Uninsured people are dying. But gotta talk about it, so that's what I'm here for. Let's get started by looking at the flaws of the US healthcare system. One might describe the healthcare system here in the US as fucked. And they'd be onto something. Let me attempt to quickly unpack this fuckery. Rather than a straightforward single-payer system where our government would insure healthcare to everyone through taxes, we have a complex two-tiered for-profit system dominated by private insurers and financed by co-spending to these private entities. Hooray, capitalism. Oh, look who's at the door. It's your friendly neighborhood trio of Captain Copay, Premium Boy, and Dr. Deductible. In this for-profit healthcare system, there are dangerously few restrictions on the private insurance industry and the pharmaceutical industry. So there's not only zero penalty, but a clear incentive for eating up your smaller competition, be it smaller drug companies or even hospitals. Yes, hospitals. By 2017, approximately 2/3 of hospitals had been subsumed by a chain. Big fish eats little fish and turns into a bigger fish. And guess what? There's no such thing as a highly competitive hospital market anymore. Anywhere. The hospital markets in 90% of metropolitan statistical areas are officially deemed highly concentrated. When there's less choice for the consumer, you know what comes next. As you might expect, prices at monopoly hospitals run 12% higher than those in markets with 4 or more rivals. We're talking about hospitals, the supposed good guys, the ones who deliver vital services that more often than not tend to run up the bill, but we pay them anyways because they're vital services. Life or death. A 12% hike in these prices can mean thousands of dollars tacked onto your bill. Now, this concept of hospital mergers is just downright dystopian to me. It seems so counterintuitive to their idealized purpose of delivering the best care to as many people as possible, but I mean, that's really not their priority. That's the priority of your doctor, not the administration who owns them. Corporate entities have one motive, and that's a profit motive. It's unimportant to them how many people will lose their dire services after a hike in prices. Just rake in those Benjamins, those sweet... Oh shit! Timmy's dying! Did you know the United States is the richest country in the history of the world, with more than double the wealth of its runner-up China? Did you know we also spend $10,586 per capita on health spending? This is by far the highest rate in the world and over $3,000 more expensive than the country in second place, Switzerland. It's over $4,000 more expensive than the third and fourth highest countries, Norway and Germany. Over $5,000 more expensive than Sweden in fifth place, and by now if you're shouting, okay, I get your point, get on with it, here's why I bring it up, because there's something ironic about that top 5 I just listed. All 5 countries, except one, guess who, provide true universal health care, meaning they cover 100% of their population. As we mentioned before in this for-profit healthcare system, there's already a litany of problems that people with insurance face. Well, I'm sure it's not out of the realm of possibility that people without insurance can face even greater problems. I mean, sure, they're not paying deductibles, co-pays, monthly premiums. They're also not getting any assistance with healthcare billing whatsoever. They're paying full price. So how many people are uninsured here in the US exactly? Well, it's almost impossible to get an exact figure, but I did my best to try and ballpark it. There's a 2018 report from the Commonwealth Fund that shows 15.5% of Americans aged 19 to 64 went uninsured, with the rate being over a quarter for those with an income under 2.5 times the poverty rate. Now, why is that specific age range of 19 to 64 so important to focus on? Because 65 is the year you qualify for Medicare, so you can finally die in peace. That is, unless you rely on prescription drugs, which aren't covered under the current Medicare plan, in which case you can die in pain. So, anyway, I picked apart census data to find that if there's approximately 62.6% of the population within this age range of 19 to 64, and if 15.5% of them are uninsured, like the report states, approximately speaking, there's more than 31 million people living day to day without health insurance. Health issues for these 31 million people are much more devastating. Say they develop a nagging discomfort, a blood issue, growing tumor. Well, rather than preventatively addressing these problems at first notice, say at an annual checkup, the cost of uninsured diagnosis and treatment might be out of their price range, and they have no choice but to bet on their problems going away by themselves. Say that doesn't happen, and before you know it, their problem snowballs. Well, now they're burdened with a much higher bill to cover reactive care, surgeries, chemotherapy, etc. Now, if you're skeptical about this reality, Gallup reports that 47% of U.S. adults never knew their out-of-pocket costs before receiving care in the emergency department, and 41% report having forgone emergency care in the past 12 months. Keep in mind, that's for all adults. The rates for uninsured adults are likely much, much higher. Whew, wow, that last segment was sad. I feel sad. Let's change topics and talk about happy things, like solutions. Most of the problems we noted stem from financial greed from these private entities. Lucky for you, all that price fixing and cost sharing comes to an end with Medicare for All. From the rubble of private insurance rises a national health insurance program. Currently, the Medicare program in the United States is eligible to citizens 65 and older. Under Medicare for All, the age limit for qualification would be reduced each year until it eventually reaches every citizen. Bernie Sanders' bill takes 4 years to implement, from 65 to 55 in year 1, 55 to 45 in year 2, 45 to 35 in year 3, and then universal coverage from there on out. Medicare for All also offers more comprehensive care than our current Medicare program. Under the bill, provisions for Medicare would expand to include vision care, dental care, and price caps on prescription drugs. Right now, pharmaceutical greed is wildly unchecked. For example, insulin, which keeps millions of Americans alive, costs 10 times more than it does in Canada. The reality is there's nothing stopping it from being 11 or 12 times more expensive tomorrow. People are dipping into their savings and rationing their insulin, which is a very dangerous practice, just to make it by. Under Medicare for All, there's a hard cap on prescription drugs at $200 a year, so nobody goes broke just to take the drugs they need to survive. Now, Medicare for All doesn't technically eliminate private insurers, it just greatly diminishes their role in the market. Duplicative care, I need to emphasize those syllables because that's a hard fucking word. Duplicative care becomes illegal, so private insurers won't be able to offer coverage for anything already covered by Medicare for All. Supplementary insurance, however, say for cosmetics, that's okay. Another benefit of Medicare for All is reframing healthcare as a human right rather than a service which must be purchased by its consumer and subject to discretionary price gouging by its seller. Psychologically, it's so hard to understate the impact on people who are living paycheck to paycheck, which, I might add, is most of us. No longer will healthcare be tied to your employer. No longer will people Uber to the emergency room because an ambulance ride for an uninsured person can run them between $400 and $1,200. And by the way, it's not even as simple as insured or uninsured. There's this thing called out-of-network billing, which means that if your plan isn't covering a specific hospital, specific institution, then you'll get charged the same as someone who's uninsured. Remember how I said 15.5% of Americans were uninsured? Well, how does that explain this? Over 85% of medical transportation produce an out-of-network bill, which means, sorry, this ambulance, which came from whichever institution, obviously you can't control that when you dial 911, is going to take you to whichever hospital. They're not going to ask you for directions. So what if the place they chose doesn't fall into your current plan? Well, shit, you're out of luck. It's full price for you, buddy.
Sorry, Timmy, no raise this year. Your healthcare plan went up instead.
Oh. Employer-sponsored health insurance is a crazily manipulative practice, but it's sadly the norm here in the States. Most Americans get their healthcare provided to them by their employer. Now, don't get it twisted. This isn't some supplemental cost that they have to worry about. It's taken out of your paycheck automatically. Now, this obviously tightens your boss's control over you. If you lose your job, you lose your health care. So tons of Americans are in a situation where they hate their job, but they're rolling with the punches and biting their tongue because they don't want to be left with the uncertainty of not having a health care plan. Concerns and misconceptions.
Medicare for all takes away my choice.
Medicare for all does not take away your choice. Mergers and profiteering middlemen do that. Let me refer you to Section 103 of the bill, aptly titled Freedom of Choice. An individual entitled to benefits under this act may obtain health services from any institution, agency, or individual qualified to participate under this act.
Oh, but the doctors and hospitals are gonna go out of business.
Medicare for All won't send doctors and hospitals out of business. Instead, it does them a huge favor by ridding the system of administrative waste. Over a quarter of physicians state that having so many rules and regulations is the most challenging part of their job, and 74% of them are spending 10 plus hours a week on paperwork and administration. Medicare for All lifts this administrative burden off of physicians, removing the most difficult part of their job and allowing them to proceed with their care as they want to do. The truth is, after breaking up hospital monopolies, some of the smaller names might be able to afford their doctors a better salary, and vice versa, some of the bigger names might see their share of the pie spread out a little bit. But something tells me that won't be putting them out of business.
Oh, if it passes, all these immigrants are gonna flood in and make it harder for me to see my doctor.
Section 102, Universal Entitlement. Subheading B2. The Secretary shall promulgate a rule consistent with federal immigration laws to prevent an individual from traveling to the United States for the sole purpose of obtaining healthcare services provided under this act.
Oh, well, then all these other citizens are gonna flood in and make it harder for me to see my doctor.
Hey, how about you just stop being so fucking paranoid and clutching your pearls all the time? I don't need a chart to tell you that when anyone has access to any doctor, they're not all going to flood to yours specifically. It's not a problem in any other country with universal health care. Won't be a problem in this one.
Well, what about the long waits in Canada, which has a single-payer system?
Here's AARP testifying that the wait times in Canada are not caused by its being a single-payer system. They attribute long waits to Canada's relatively low health spending, and if you remember from earlier in the video, that's where we're number one. The Centers for Medicare and Medicaid Services, which is .gov for you source skeptics, came up with projections for national health expenditures over the next decade. They concluded that on our current trajectory, by 2027, our health expenditures were going to reach $6 trillion annually and consume 19.4% of our GDP. That's 19 cents out of every dollar going to fund a broken healthcare system. A study by the Political Economy Research Institute applied this math and found that Medicare for All would save $5.1 trillion over the decade, shaving 2% off the GDP. One of the biggest points of saving comes from removing the wasteful administrative costs of healthcare. The American College of Physicians estimates that 2017 administrative savings under single-payer reform would have been $503 billion. Oh, and a quick side note while we're talking about money, 54% of our discretionary budget goes to the military and 6% goes to Medicare and health, so I don't know, maybe we can balance our budgets better, but I'm just some fucking dude on YouTube, so who cares? Well, thanks for making it through that lengthy analysis. Let's recap with two simple questions about Medicare for All. Who would be most affected by it, and why is it important that it gets implemented? So who would be affected by this? Well, everyone, really. I mean, for starters, 100% of the population would be insured. That's a good start. But even those with healthcare plans that they currently do like would see significant benefits, both financially and psychologically. For starters, the elimination of co-spending, so no more co-pays, no more premiums, no more deductibles. That would save a lot of money out of the overwhelming majority of humans' pocketbooks. Healthcare becomes free at the point of service, full stop. You are no longer beholden to the giants of the private health insurance and pharmaceutical industries who are free right now to roam about and price gouge as they please. Nowadays, you can walk into your pharmacy from one day to the next and find out that your life-saving drug has doubled in price, and too bad there's nothing you can do about it, because that's not negotiated here. Under Medicare for All, the prices of prescription drugs are hard capped at $200 a year, so no longer is anyone going to die because they can't afford the drugs they need to survive. There's also more flexibility in the workplace now that nobody has to worry about losing their health care if they switch jobs. Getting covered by the government instead of your boss grants you more leverage in wage negotiations, since a chunk of your salary won't be taken out automatically to provide for your healthcare plan. But without question, the greatest beneficiaries of Medicare for All are the 31 million plus people currently living without health insurance. Why is it important to pass Medicare for All? Newsflash, the fucking sky is falling. Hospitals are monopolizing. Prices are soaring. Wages are stagnant. 15.5% of humans are uninsured here in America. The way health insurance is currently doled out in this country is just unfriendly and unethical, not to mention increasingly unaffordable. Medicare for All eliminates the profit motive of these healthcare giants and makes them focus on actually providing healthcare. Wow, thank you so much for watching. This video took me about a week to put together with all the production and research and script writing and 20 different takes. So again, if you could spare me a donation on Patreon, I'd greatly appreciate it, and it would give me the flexibility to create more leftist content like this in the future. Remember that I have my sources linked down in the description if you want to fact check me, you fucker. No, but seriously, I think the Gallup report on the U.S. healthcare cost crisis is the most interesting of the bunch. It's just very visually appealing and lots of graphs and charts that are very clear with their messaging. So I linked that one first down below, and yeah, if you could please share that around, that would do a great service. Remember to leave a like and subscribe. Please share this with your boomer grandpa. Don't worry about him blowing a gasket because his Medicare will cover for that. I shouldn't have made that joke. But in all seriousness, have a wonderful day.